Agatha Raisin and the awkward afternoon tea. A village tea turns bitter when pride, secrets and quiet grudges collide, because in Carsley even the prettiest scone can hide something deadly. So settle in and tell us, where in the world are you listening from tonight? And subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. No one in this village appreciates proper standards, Agatha announced, sweeping into the WI hall with a force that made 3 women jump and 1 teacup wobble. She marched across the wooden floor with the brisk determination of someone who believed her entrance alone would raise the tone of the room. Her new blazer, navy, sharply tailored and ruinously expensive, swished behind her in what she imagined was an authoritative flourish. "Afternoon tea," she declared, placing her handbag on the table with a dramatic thud, "requires precision, London precision, not whatever muddle passes for hospitality around here." Several WI ladies exchanged looks. Mrs. Mason adjusted her glasses in the way she always did when preparing for trouble. Doris Simpson whispered, "Here we go," in a tone that suggested she had already prepared for the full performance. Agatha ignored them. She was in a mood, an ambitious mood. This tea would, she had decided, wipe away the lingering shame of her last village event, the memory of which still clung to Carsley gossip like fluff on a wool jumper. Today she would show them. She would show everyone. And then she noticed her audience was not actually looking at her, not properly. Their attention had drifted toward a woman standing near the long trestle table, speaking lightly with Mrs. Bloxby. Agatha's eyes narrowed. The stranger was tall, slender, and dressed in one of those clever town outfits that seemed simple until you realized the fabric cost more than a month's mortgage payment. Her shoes were dainty, utterly unsuitable for muddy lanes, and clearly chosen to display her sense of superiority over rural cobbles and common sense. "Oh, Agatha," Mrs. Bloxby said with her gentle smile, "may I introduce Celia Harcourt? She runs an afternoon tea enterprise in Mercester." "A what?" Agatha asked, suspicious of anyone described with the word enterprise. "A curated experience," Celia said, offering a hand that suggested it had never touched a washing-up brush. "Artisan teas, themed menus, demonstrations. Very on-trend." Agatha bristled. "This is the Cotswolds, not Covent Garden." A few ladies tittered. Celia smiled with the patient confidence of someone accustomed to admiration. "True, but the Cotswolds have become aspirational. People want authenticity, with polish." Agatha crossed her arms. "I'll have you know I organised afternoon teas in London. The real sort." "Of course," Celia replied with a warm, devastating softness. "Though standards have changed, expectations are higher now." The remark hung in the air like a slap wrapped in silk. Several women made small, delighted noises as though the village had been handed an early Christmas present. Celia moved gracefully down the table, pointing at plates and cloths. "This china is charmingly rustic, but perhaps too eclectic. And the napkins, paper really isn't on brand anymore. Also, the jam must be placed to the left of the scones, not the right. It signals order." Agatha sputtered. "Signals? What?" "Oh, and cream first," Celia added lightly. "Jam on top. It photographs better." "Photographs?" Agatha repeated. "Yes," Celia said. "People expect visuals. My events are often booked by influencers." The WI ladies gasped. No one in Carsley had ever knowingly encountered an influencer, though Susan Feathers once met someone from the Mercester Gazette and insisted it counted. Agatha felt her authority slipping. She forced a laugh. "Well, we'll see what the committee says." "We already have," said Mrs. Mason, smoothing her skirt with an air of guilty pleasure. "We thought Celia's expertise could guide us, just for this event." "Guide?" Agatha echoed. A few women nodded. One even looked apologetic before remembering she disliked Agatha and straightened up again. Celia stepped closer, lowering her voice to an intimate, patronizing purr. "Please don't take offense, Miss Raisin. Community events need fresh ideas, a sense of direction." Agatha felt heat shoot up her neck. No one directed Agatha Raisin. But before she could respond, Celia turned toward Graham Pritt, who had been lingering awkwardly near the biscuit tin. "Estate agents," she said cheerfully, "are never short of stories. I've seen worse frauds in your line of work than anywhere else." Graham stiffened as though jabbed with a hatpin. "I don't know what you mean." "Oh, nothing," Celia said too quickly. just that people rarely disclose everything about damp issues, valuations, little things. Graham tugged at his collar. Agatha, ever alert to tension that didn't involve her, filed the exchange away. People didn't flush like that unless there was something juicy behind it. Before she could probe, Harriet Pritt, baker, gossip, and self-appointed guardian of village culinary pride, marched forward. "I hear you want my cakes for a discount," she snapped. Celia blinked. "I assumed that for a community event." "Community? You're not even from here," Harriet barked. "I'm not slaving away for pennies so you can prance around calling it artisan." Celia remained calm, only raising an eyebrow. "I expected professional courtesy." "Courtesy," Harriet repeated, outraged. "I'll give you courtesy, full price." The room rustled with glee. Nothing pleased Carsley more than a quarrel with cake involved. Agatha should have enjoyed it. Normally she would have, but humiliation still prickled under her immaculate blazer. She could feel pitying glances fluttering toward her like midges. Celia turned back to Agatha with a placid smile. "If we streamline responsibilities, we can avoid confusion. I'll lead the presentation. You can coordinate seating." "Seating?" Agatha croaked. "I organized the entire event." "Yes," Celia said kindly, "and now we'll refine it. Together." It was the together that did it. That falsely inclusive, nauseatingly gentle together. Agatha felt her pride crumble, then solidify again like badly mixed icing. With a rigid smile, she said, "Excuse me," and stalked toward the door. The hall buzzed behind her, some whispering, some smirking, one or two attempting sympathy but not trying hard. Her heartbeat thudded with fury. She had come here to reclaim her dignity. Instead, she had been rearranged like a mismatched tea tray by a woman in ridiculous shoes. She stepped outside, slamming the door just hard enough to make the window rattle. The weak autumn light caught on the hall's stone wall, making everything look too calm for her mood. Agatha inhaled sharply. If Celia Harcourt thought she could barge into Carsley and take over, she had another thing coming. This village had survived centuries. It could certainly survive one over-groomed expert from Mercester. "No one humiliates Agatha Raisin," she muttered. "No one." Inside, laughter rose, light, sharp, unmistakably about her. She bristled. Fine. If they wanted a battle over scones and jam placement, she would give them a war. And Celia Harcourt would soon learn that Carsley might look quaint, but its inhabitants were vicious when roused, especially the one standing outside the hall door, plotting her comeback with all the determination of a general preparing for siege. Agatha straightened her blazer, lifted her chin, and marched off. Hodge would understand. He always did. And if not, at least he never corrected her napkin placement. At home, the kettle clicked on with a weary sigh, as though accustomed to Agatha's dramatic returns. Hodge lifted his head from the sofa, yawned extravagantly, and gave her a look of mild disappointment, as if he'd expected her to win whatever battle she had clearly lost. "Don't judge me," Agatha snapped, kicking off her shoes. "It's only just begun." Hodge stretched, unimpressed, and curled back into his cushion. Agatha lit a cigarette, only one because she was being virtuous, and exhaled a long plume of frustration. The war over afternoon tea had begun. The next morning, she woke with the grim clarity of a woman preparing for battle, and Carsley had no idea what was coming. "Make it shorter, sharper, and absolutely no frizz," Agatha ordered, stabbing a finger toward the mirror as though threatening her own reflection. The hairdresser in Evesham, a thin girl with nervous wrists, nodded so vigorously her comb rattled against the trolley. Agatha watched every snip with studied intensity. If she couldn't control the wretched afternoon tea, she could at least control how dazzling she looked at it. A crisp bob with glossier ends would send a message. She remained Carsley's reigning force in social events, no matter what that smug Celia Harcourt thought. "Understated glamour," Agatha murmured, "but not too understated. People should admire without assuming I'm trying." "Yes, Mrs. Raisin," the girl said, though her eyes betrayed confusion at the concept. When the cut was finished, Agatha leaned close to the mirror. The bob was neat, the fringe sat correctly, and the light caught the blonde in a flattering way. She lifted her chin, satisfied. "Good. It says confidence without desperation." The girl did not comment. Agatha paid, leaving a tip possibly larger than necessary to convey her position as a woman of taste. She stepped out of the salon, heels tapping briskly as she made for the car. The bright, crisp afternoon suited her mood. Everything felt sharper, more promising. On the drive back toward Carsley, she planned her errands with the focus of a military strategist. Harriet's bakery first. She needed a cake that would eclipse whatever nonsense Celia intended to parade around. Something striking. Something that shouted, "Agatha Raisin knows quality." The bell above the bakery door jingled as she entered. Warm air, heavy with sugar and fresh bread, enveloped her instantly. Harriet Pritt stood behind the counter, dusted in flour and looking as though she had just fought a spirited battle with pastry. "Oh, it's you," Harriet said, not unfriendly but certainly not thrilled. "Let me guess. You're here to complain about that Mercester woman." "I'm here," Agatha replied loftily, "to order a cake of distinction, something elegant, sophisticated, and, most importantly, mine." Harriet gave a snort. "You mean something that'll make that Celia creature look like she's peddling supermarket tat?" "Precisely," Agatha said, pleased they understood each other. Harriet wiped her hands. "You know what she asked? Wanted 10 lemon drizzles for a fraction of the price. Said it was for brand synergy." Harriet rolled her eyes so hard she nearly toppled. These town types think they can waltz in, take over, and will curtsy like good little villagers. Agatha leaned forward, scenting useful gossip. "Did she now?" "Oh, yes. And she's bringing her own lemon curd for the tea. Wouldn't touch anyone else's, keeps it in a blasted locked container. Who locks curd?" Agatha's eyebrows shot up. "Locked?" "Like some precious jewel," Harriet grumbled. "No one's allowed near it." A tiny bell of curiosity chimed in Agatha's mind. People who locked food were hiding something, though probably nothing delicious. Before she could pry further, Harriet continued furiously. "And let me tell you, people who come into another woman's village with big ideas deserve what they get." Several customers turned. One woman gasped faintly, clearly delighted at the prospect of drama. Agatha sensed danger. Comments like that stuck easily in village memory. "Well," she said brightly, "I'm sure Celia means no harm. Merely ambition." "Ambition?" Harriet barked. "She wants to turn us all into marketing props. Over my dead, over my shop." Agatha changed the subject, discussing cake styles until they settled on a towering creation with sugared petals. It was expensive, unnecessary, and absolutely perfect. She left the bakery with the smug pleasure of a general carrying a secret weapon. But as she walked to her car, Celia's locked lemon curd nagged her thoughts. Who locked curd, indeed? Back in Carsley, she drove straight to the vicarage. Mrs. Bloxby always had a way of untangling village nonsense with her soothing voice and wise eyes. And Agatha, though she would never admit it, relied on that steadiness more than she liked. Mrs. Bloxby answered the door with her usual calm warmth. "Agatha, dear, you look very smart. New haircut?" "Subtle refinement," Agatha said, brushing her bob. "But never mind that. Tell me what you know about that woman Celia." Mrs. Bloxby ushered her into the sitting room, where knitted cushions and polished furniture created an atmosphere of comforting order. The kettle whistled faintly in the kitchen. "There have been murmurs," Mrs. Bloxby admitted, sitting with her hands folded. "Some of the parish ladies say Celia has a habit of asking rather personal questions about savings, investments, business decisions." Agatha frowned. "Why would she want that?" "She presents it as helping people position themselves for future growth. But people feel uneasy. One woman told me she felt pressured to show Celia a bank statement." Agatha stiffened. "A bank statement? Over tea?" Mrs. Bloxby gave a small, regretful nod. "You know how some people hide pushiness behind kindness." Agatha snorted. "She hides nothing. She's obvious about it." Still, the idea unsettled her. Celia collecting financial information felt more pointed than ordinary nosiness. There was something calculating in the woman's glossy smile, something sharp beneath the charm. "And to think I heard this from you only now," Agatha said, half injured. "I didn't want to spread rumours," Mrs. Bloxby replied gently, "but perhaps a little caution isn't unwise." Agatha sighed. "I need more than caution. I need to outshine her." Mrs. Bloxby's smile was kind. "Agatha, you don't need to compete with anyone." Agatha nearly laughed. "Oh, you'd be surprised." She stood, thanked her friend, and headed home, cake order form tucked under one arm. The village lanes felt smugly peaceful, as though Carsley itself enjoyed watching her fuss. At home, Hodge greeted her with the disdain of a creature certain he owned the property. He hopped onto her lap the instant she sat, kneading her skirt with blunt paws. "Don't smudge the fabric," Agatha grumbled, though she stroked his head. "I've had a long day. That woman is everywhere." Hodge blinked, unimpressed. Agatha leaned back, cigarette between her fingers. She took one thoughtful drag, more contemplative than habitual. The new haircut, the extravagant cake, the gossip. These were simply tools in a larger battle. She would reclaim her place. She would regain control. She would look better than Celia if it killed her. Not literally, of course. She flicked ash into the tray. "Someone's planning something for that tea," she murmured. "And it isn't me." Hodge stretched luxuriously as though confirming the thought. Agatha exhaled slowly, determination sharpening like a knife. Celia Harcourt might think she had Carsley wrapped in ribbon, but she was wrong. The village was stirring. People whispered. Harriet fumed. Graham Pritt had gone oddly silent. And Celia, with her locked jar and probing questions, was not simply ambitious. She was dangerous. Agatha stroked Hodge's fur. "Whatever she's planning, darling, I'll beat her to it." Hodge yawned, unimpressed but comfortable. The kettle clicked off in the kitchen with a gentle sigh, as if offering quiet encouragement. Agatha smiled, already plotting 3 different ways to steal back the spotlight, none of them subtle, all of them pure Agatha Raisin. The evening settled around the cottage, warm and expectant. Something was coming, and Agatha intended to be ready. "Move, please. Some of us are carrying civilization," Agatha huffed, elbowing the W.I. hall door with her hip as she staggered inside. Her arms were full of Harriet Pritt's towering cake, heavy with sugared petals and unmistakably expensive. A smear of frosting glistened on her sleeve, which she hoped no one would notice. She expected gasps of admiration or at least startled respect. What she found instead stopped her dead. The hall, her hall, had been transformed. Bunting draped in elegant scallops fluttered along the rafters. Crisp linen cloths covered the tables in neat lines. Each place setting held a delicate printed menu bearing a tasteful logo. Cotswold Afternoon Tea Experience, curated by Celia Harcourt. Agatha froze, cake sagging slightly in her grip. What in the name of sanity is all this? Doris Simpson, bustling past with a tray of polished cutlery, gave a helpless shrug. Celia thought it would elevate the occasion. "Elevate?" Agatha repeated, her voice sharp enough to slice the cake she had nearly dropped. Elevate compared to what? Compared to whom? Before Doris could escape, Celia herself glided across the hall like a swan who had successfully bullied all the other swans into rowing her barge. She wore a fitted cream blouse, immaculate trousers, and a smile that implied pity for anyone who hadn't achieved her level of refinement. "Oh, Agatha," she said with airy delight, "you made it, and you've brought something charming." "It's a cake," Agatha snapped. "A centerpiece." Celia examined it with gentle amusement. "How wonderfully homemade looking." A few W.I. women giggled. Agatha's cheeks flamed. "It is homemade," one of the women whispered loudly. "Saw one exactly like it in the Mercester supermarket yesterday." Agatha set the cake down with more force than necessary. "It's about taste, not origin." "Indeed," Celia murmured, already rearranging the cloth under it. The hall was already buzzing with villagers, cups clinking and chairs scraping. Somewhere outside, a sulky overcast sky made the windows dim, as if even the weather wanted no part of this humiliation. Agatha gritted her teeth. "Where shall I put the floral centerpieces I prepared?" "Oh, those?" Celia said with faux surprise. "They didn't fit the updated aesthetic, so I moved them behind the service table. I hope you don't mind." Agatha did mind. She minded with every fibre of her being. But she had brought a secret weapon, Hodge. He was tucked in a discreet carrier under the table. Doris had carried him in earlier, rolling her eyes and calling it one of your mad ideas. A moral support passenger smuggled in despite the WI's strict no pets at food events rule. She planned only to show him off later, in a moment of triumph. A tasteful moment, a triumphant moment. But Hodge had his own ideas. As Agatha bent to reposition a stack of plates, the carrier shifted. A small, decisive paw forced open the latch, and with calm inevitability, Hodge slipped out like a bored duchess leaving a dull party. "No, no, no, no," Agatha hissed. Hodge trotted under the tables, tail high, brushing ankles and provoking startled squeaks. Someone jerked sideways, sending a spoon flying. Another stumbled into a chair leg. Then came the crash. A tray of cups tipped, toppled, and shattered across the floor in a glorious, echoing catastrophe. Laughter rose in shocked ripples. Someone clapped. Someone else said, "Typical, isn't it?" Agatha's humiliation was complete. She lunged after the cat, but he slipped away, disappearing under the far table. Celia merely raised one eyebrow, managing to display pity and triumph simultaneously. "Perhaps pets are best left at home," she said sweetly. Agatha wanted to throw the cake at her, preferably icing first. Furious, she retreated into the kitchen to compose herself, and overheard voices. Sharp, tense voices. Graham Pritt stood near the pantry, posture stiff and awkward. Celia faced him, elegance sharpened into a quiet blade. "Support the sponsorship scheme," she said, "or your creative paperwork becomes public knowledge." Graham swallowed audibly. "I don't know what you mean." "Oh, come now." Celia's tone was silk over steel. "Misdescribed properties, inventive valuations, buyers who don't appreciate surprises. One phone call from me, and you'll be explaining yourself to head office." Graham's face had gone a shade paler than the icing on Agatha's ruined cake. Celia leaned closer. "Back me at the committee meeting, or I start talking." She turned and strode out before he could reply. Agatha stood frozen behind the doorframe, pulse thudding. So Celia wasn't merely patronizing, she was dangerous. Before she could fully savor this revelation, Graham slunk past her, muttering something about needing fresh air. He looked guilty enough to arouse suspicion in a stone statue. Agatha returned to the hall, feeling the tiny thrill of having uncovered something juicy. The crowd had grown livelier, chatter rising in bright notes as cups filled and cake slices vanished. But something else caught her eye. Celia had returned to the head table and was quietly unpacking a small wicker hamper. She removed a delicate plate, a private one clearly not intended for public use. An immaculate scone sat upon it, and Agatha saw her take a spoonful of something golden from the cooler box beneath, the special lemon curd Harriet had mentioned. She spread it with unusual care as though ensuring no other hand would touch it. "A clue," whispered Agatha's intuition. "Something there. Something important." She drifted nearer, pretending to examine the bunting. Celia placed the plate beside her cup with the serene pride of someone placing a crown jewel on display. Before Agatha could get closer, another disturbance erupted. Claire Jennings, the nervous schoolteacher, stood rigid as Celia announced loudly, "Everyone appreciates clarity. Records should always be kept spotless." Claire turned chalk white, excused herself in a choked whisper, and fled to the ladies. She left behind a small, crumpled scrap near the table leg, half burned as though she'd tried to destroy it but lost her nerve. Agatha bent quickly, scooping it up before anyone noticed. Burn marks edged the paper, but faint writing showed through. She tucked it into her pocket, triumphant. The atmosphere shifted again as a folded note appeared, slipped discreetly under the teapot cosy at Celia's place. Celia lifted it casually, but her expression changed the instant her eyes moved across the words. Her smile froze, then hardened. For a split second the hall felt colder. Then she folded the note, tucked it into her pocket, and turned to the crowd with a dazzling, brittle brightness. "Ladies," she announced, raising her cup, "to community spirit." People raised their cups obediently, though several exchanged puzzled glances. Agatha watched her closely. Something had rattled Celia, something enough to crack that polished exterior. A worm of tension curled in Agatha's stomach, mingled with excitement. Whatever Celia had read, it wasn't friendly. Someone in the village was challenging the queen of curated tea. She sipped lukewarm punch, ignoring the snickers still buzzing around her ruined cake. Her humiliation remained sharp, but beneath it something else stirred, a sense of impending trouble. Celia Harcourt was under threat, and Agatha, cake-smeared sleeve and all, had no idea just how soon that threat would strike. Hodge reappeared then, rubbing against her ankle as though offering belated comfort. "Well," Agatha murmured, bending to scoop him up, "you certainly know how to make an entrance." Hodge blinked serenely, indifferent to the chaos he'd caused. Agatha sighed. "I suppose one of us should enjoy the day." In the kitchen the kettle clicked off with a soft, weary sigh, as if bracing for what lay ahead. Agatha held Hodge close, unaware that her ruined cake and Celia's private scone would soon be overshadowed by a far more dangerous dish on the menu: murder. The next morning, They found her, Agatha announced to Hodge, who yawned at her from the sofa with deliberate indifference. Celia Harcourt. Dead. Hodge blinked as if to say people were always being dramatic. And don't give me that look, Agatha added, grabbing her handbag. You didn't see her eyes yesterday, like two burnt currants floating in fury. She clipped on her heels and marched out, determined to be the first to collect the details. The morning was clear and chilly, the sort that made Carsley look deceptively innocent. Agatha swept into Harriet's bakery, where the bell above the door gave a startled jangle. The air inside was warm, thick with sugar and something sharper, resentment, rising like yeast. She wasn't here for cake. She was here for answers. Harriet Pritt had been furious yesterday, and furious people sometimes did stupid things. Harriet slammed a tray onto the counter. If you're here to complain about the lemon drizzle again, I swear. Don't be ridiculous, Agatha said, lifting her chin. I'm here to offer condolences. A woman you disliked has just died. I'd think you'd be in mourning. I didn't dislike her, Harriet retorted. I despised her. Totally different. She folded her arms. And before you start poking your nose, yes, I went into that kitchen yesterday. The ovens were too hot. Again. Agatha widened her eyes with masterful innocence. Did you touch Celia's things? The hamper, perhaps? The curd? Harriet bristled. I may have nudged the hamper by accident, but I never touched that ridiculous locked jar. Who locks lemon curd? Honestly, that woman needed therapy. Agatha pretended to nod sympathetically while scanning the shop. The bread shelves gleamed, the pastries glistened, and over by the side table sat Graham Pritt, fiddling with a stack of glossy property brochures. Morning, he said weakly. Agatha stepped closer. Graham's cuff bore a faint brown smear, soil, unless the man habitually dipped his sleeves in gravy. When he noticed her stare, he tugged the cuff down with panicked haste. Interesting. You look tired, Graham, Agatha said sweetly. Busy week, he muttered. Of course, she replied, her tone heavy with implication. Busy for all of us. Harriet clattered more trays to drown the tension. Celia wanted my cakes half price for her artisan packages. Can you imagine? She said my presentation didn't meet professional standards. Agatha gasped theatrically. Your presentation is flawless. Harriet softened slightly. Thank you. At least someone appreciates me. And did Celia often criticize others? Agatha asked, casually leaning on the counter. Oh, everyone, Harriet said bitterly. But she really had it in for Graham, accused him of misleading buyers, told him she had contacts who could clean up the industry, always nosing. Graham turned pink. She exaggerated. Agatha's interest sharpened. Harriet continued venting. Celia's arrogance, her branding ideas, her habit of giving advice no one asked for. Every complaint painted a clearer picture. Celia had been provoking half the village. But provocation wasn't murder, not by itself. Agatha thanked them both, though Graham looked as relieved as if she'd issued a pardon. She exited the bakery feeling both triumphant and unsatisfied. Harriet had motive, anger, and opportunity, but so far she lacked the flavour of a killer. Still, Agatha would keep her as a strong red herring. It was important to be organised. Her stomach grumbled. Clearly it was time for comfort and gin. The Red Lion was quiet, the lunchtime crowd subdued. Agatha ordered a small gin and pretended it wasn't purely medicinal. She coaxed the barman into conversation. "Did you know Celia Harcourt?" she asked lightly. "Oh, yes," he said, eyes lighting with gossip. "Used to come in with clients. Loud voice, but not loud enough to drown out the complaint she gave that estate agent once." Agatha leaned closer. "Complaint?" The barman grinned. "She tore him to shreds in front of half the pub. Said he lied about a cottage being structurally sound when it was basically held together with prayers. Told him she'd expose him if he didn't refund the couple." Agatha's pulse quickened. "Which estate agent?" "That Pritt fellow, Graham. He stormed out red as a beetroot." Now that was tasty. She sipped her gin triumphantly, then immediately regretted the strength of it. She phoned Charles on the walk home, craving admiration. He listened, amused. "Agatha, you're chasing the most obvious villain." "Obvious villains often are villains," she snapped. Charles chuckled. "Or they're simply unlucky enough to be noticed by you, my dear." Agatha hung up before he could further annoy her. But irritation couldn't quite smother her certainty. Graham Pritt was hiding something, and she intended to find out what. Agatha waited outside the Pritz cottage that afternoon under the pretense of adjusting her handbag clasp. In truth, she was studying Graham with fierce concentration. He stepped out of the cottage, glancing around nervously before locking the boot of his car. The boot thumped shut too quickly, too firmly, a guilty close. Agatha stepped forward. "Graham, how lovely to see you." He nearly swallowed his tongue. "Oh, Mrs. Raisin, I didn't notice you." "Clearly," she said. "Off somewhere?" "Work," he squeaked. "In the middle of the day?" he fumbled. "Sometimes people need houses, urgently." Agatha smiled with predatory sweetness. "Did Celia need one?" His face drained, confirming her suspicion. "I don't know anything about that." She let him escape, but her eyes narrowed. Soil on the cuff, a boot that mustn't be opened, a history of humiliation at Celia's hands, and foxgloves. There was a bed of them behind the bakery, newly trimmed. Poisonous plants trimmed right before a murder felt like more than gardening zeal. Agatha walked around the side of the bakery yard again, pretending to search for her lost earring. The foxglove patch sat neat, cut low in a suspiciously tidy manner. Her shoe nudged a pile of discarded stems. Someone had been pruning, but why now, in the chill post-autumn air? She crouched, touching one of the stems. A sticky residue clung to her fingertips. She wiped it quickly on her skirt. The clue quivered with promise. She straightened, feeling the thrill of the chase warming her spine. Graham might not be clever, but desperation could sharpen even dull minds. Still, Harriet wasn't entirely off the hook, and Claire had panicked at the tea, and the delivery driver had looked oddly uncomfortable earlier. The village had never been so generously supplied with suspects. Her afternoon waned in a haze of analysis and pacing. She needed direction. She needed confirmation. She needed gin, unfortunately. By early evening, she sat at her kitchen table, notebook open, Hodge on a chair beside her. The clues sprawled untidily across the page. Celia brought her own lemon curd, locked. Only her plate contaminated. Graham humiliated publicly by her. Foxgloves cut recently. Harriet angry enough to shout murder in a bakery queue. Claire terrified of records, threat note promising burial. It was a delicious mess. The phone rang. She grabbed it eagerly. "Aggie!" Roy's voice sparkled down the line. "Darling, I heard there's been a murder in your charming mud-sloshed hamlet. Are you leading the investigation?" "Officially, no," Agatha replied. "Unofficially, absolutely," Roy squealed. "Do you know who did it?" "Not yet," she admitted. "But I will." He sighed appreciatively. "I adore your confidence. It's almost rational." Agatha slammed the receiver down before he could ruin her mood. Night crept in. She returned outside the Pritz cottage again, leaning casually against a lamppost. Graham emerged, carrying a bin bag. He jumped when he saw her. "Working late," she said. "Just clearing rubbish." He looked ready to bolt. Agatha watched him hurry back indoors and felt a shiver, not of fear, but of anticipation. Something was rotting behind the pleasant facade of the Pritt household. She turned toward home, determination sharpening. Someone in Carsley had murdered Celia Harcourt. Someone clever enough to slip poison into a locked-jar enthusiast's private scone. Someone frightened enough to cut down foxgloves in the cold weeks. Someone petty enough to resent her curated empire. Her heels clicked decisively as she walked. She would unravel this. Back home, Hodge greeted her with a soft chirrup. She scooped him up, breathing in the warm, familiar scent of cat fur and domestic safety. "Well," she murmured, "it appears the Pritts are gardening at suspicious hours." Hodge stretched, utterly untroubled by murder or mysteries. Agatha set him down gently, lit the fire, and watched the first sparks catch. A kettle sighed on the hob, settling into a comforting rhythm. She sat back with a smile. Tomorrow, she would dig further. And unlike Celia Harcourt, Agatha Raisin had no intention of being buried. "Claire Jennings is hiding something," Agatha announced to Hodge as she dabbed concealer beneath her eyes. "And don't judge me. You saw how she bolted at the tea. People don't sprint to the ladies because the lemon curd is emotional." Hodge blinked slowly, uninterested in village psychology, and curled into a warm loaf on the bed. Agatha snapped her compact shut and strode out the door with purpose sharp enough to cut hedges. The school sat behind the playing fields, mist clinging low enough to make everything look faintly unreal. Agatha marched through the gates with the air of an inspector general, ignoring the gawping of two children who whispered, "Is that the lady who ruined the tea?" Inside the staff room, Claire Jennings sat hunched over a mug, pale and twitchy. She shot up when Agatha entered. "Oh, Mrs. Raisin, I wasn't expecting— Did the head know you were coming?" "Of course," Agatha lied smoothly. She sat opposite Claire and folded her hands like a benevolent interrogator. "Just here about safety for village events. After the incident." Claire's knuckles whitened around her mug. "Terrible business. Just terrible." Agatha leaned in. "Funny thing, Claire. Celia seemed to know you. Recognized you from somewhere." Claire's eyes flashed panic before she could hide it. "Well, Mercester is very big." "Not that big," Agatha said, "and you went very white when she mentioned clear records. Why was that?" Claire's breath caught. "It's nothing. A misunderstanding." Agatha softened her voice with faux sympathy. "Claire, you can tell me. I'm practically a friend." "Oh, no, you're not," Claire blurted, then looked horrified at her own honesty. Agatha straightened. "Well, I could be, if you tell me why Celia rattled you." Something small inside Claire crumpled. She slumped. "It was years ago. I was 18. I accidentally walked out of a shop with lipstick I hadn't paid for." Agatha stared. "Accidentally?" "I panicked and put it in my pocket. I was stupid. They didn't press charges, but Celia said she remembered the manager. She hinted she could, well, ruin my career if she wanted." Agatha frowned. It was classic Celia, weaponize the trivial. "Did you ever speak to her alone yesterday?" she asked. "No," Claire said, voice shaky but firm, "and I was never near the kitchen. Ask anyone from the WI. I was making tea continuously." Red herring established, thought Agatha, but Claire's fear was genuine. She left the staff room satisfied and went straight to the vicarage. Mrs. Blocksby opened the door with her usual serene warmth. "Agatha, dear, you look determined." "I am," Agatha replied. "Celia was blackmailing half the county. What do you know?" Mrs. Blocksby sighed with the air of someone who wished the world were less complicated. "Some parishioners mentioned she asked about church finances." Agatha's eyes widened. "What business is that of hers?" "She said she was advising on modern fundraising strategies, but some felt pressured." "Pressed how?" Agatha demanded. "Numbers, accounts, questions about unused rooms and old donations. Nothing overtly threatening," Mrs. Blocksby said gently. "Just unsettling." Agatha sniffed. Everything about that woman was unsettling. Mrs. Blocksby hesitated, then reached into a drawer. "There is something I should show you. This was found under a chair in the WI hall after the tea, tucked where someone clearly meant to retrieve it later." Agatha's eyes gleamed. "Evidence?" "A notebook," Mrs. Blocksby clarified. "Celia's." She handed over a slim black notebook, its cover unassuming but scuffed at the corners. Agatha opened it eagerly. Inside were cryptic entries, clusters of initials, monetary figures, and abrupt notes. DP, damp issue, overvaluation, GP, credit card mess. CJ, old theft, HB, fundraising gaps. Agatha's breath hitched. "This is a conspiracy ledger." Mrs. Blocksby smiled faintly. "It's more likely she was compiling information for business leverage." "Same thing," Agatha said. "We need to examine every page." "We?" Mrs. Blocksby echoed. "Fine, I need to examine every page." She stuffed the notebook into her handbag with dramatic purpose. This case was growing richer by the minute, and Celia's network of meddling stretched far wider than expected. Agatha practically swaggered home. Once inside, she dumped her handbag on the kitchen table, retrieved the notebook, the threatening note, and her own scribbled theories, and spread them like tarot cards of doom. Hodge hopped onto a chair, eyeing the chaos with faint disdain. "Don't even think about walking on this," Agatha warned. "These pages contain the entire rotten underside of Castley." Hodge immediately placed a paw on the note. Agatha swatted him away. "Honestly, this is serious work." She lit a cigarette, one, exactly one, and inhaled thoughtfully. "Let's see. DP, damp problem, overvaluation, Graham Pritt, obviously, and GP, credit card mess, Graham again. Unless we have another GP, do we?" Hodge flicked an ear. "CJ, Claire Jennings, old theft. She told me herself. HB must be Harriet's bakery. Missing funds or something. Agatha tapped the notebook triumphantly. She really was collecting leverage. She flipped through more pages, little arrows, numbers, alarming underlines. She practically built a blackmail empire before she died. But who killed her? Her mind whirled. Claire had motive but no opportunity. Harriet had rage but claimed innocence about the Kurd. Graham had both motive and opportunity, and a foxglove patch right under his nose, not to mention soil smears and panic attacks. Agatha scribbled frantically, building a chart so convoluted it looked like the doodles of a mad woman mapping ley lines. "This," she said aloud, "is practically solved." Hodge rolled onto his back in disbelief. Agatha jabbed the notebook with her pen. "But we're missing something. Financial records, properties, valuations. Charles will know, annoyingly." She hated asking him for help. It meant admitting she didn't know everything. And Charles Fraith, with his lazy charm and smug amusement, never let her forget it. But she needed him. She reached for the phone and paused. She refused to call sounding needy. She needed to sound aloof, intellectual, superior. She cleared her throat and dialed. Charles answered on the third ring. "Aggie, how's Carsley? Still brimming with scandal and overcooked sponge?" "Charles," she said in her coldest tone, "I require your assistance." He purred. "Lovely to hear from you too." "It's financial," she said quickly before he could tease. "Estate agents, valuations, debt, things you pretend to understand because you're wealthy." Charles laughed. "Darling, I understand them because they're dull and necessary." "Wonderful," Agatha snapped. "I need clarification on valuation fraud." There was a pause. "Aggie, what exactly are you wrapped up in?" "Nothing yet," she said. "But I will be wrapped up in something if you don't help." Charles sighed fondly. "Very well. Come by tomorrow. Bring biscuits." "I'm solving a murder, Charles, not packing a picnic." "Then bring motivation," he replied cheerfully and hung up. Agatha glared at the receiver. She hated needing him. She hated even more that he would probably be right about something. Hodge padded across the table despite her earlier warning, dragging his tail over a page. "Hodge," she snapped. He sat right on the notebook. Agatha exhaled slowly, then reached out and stroked him. "Fine. Sit on the evidence. Maybe it will warm the case." Her anger softened. The fire crackled in the grate. The kettle clicked off with a weary sigh, filling the kitchen with homely reassurance. Agatha gathered the papers, stacked them neatly, and tapped them with renewed confidence. "Tomorrow we tackle finances, foxgloves, and Fraith," she said. "Not necessarily in that order." Hodge yawned, curled into a perfect circle, and closed his eyes. Agatha smiled, feeling, despite murder, blackmail, and village stupidity, a strange, warm steadiness. The mystery was deepening, and she was ready. "Try to behave," Charles murmured as he opened the passenger door of his old convertible. Agatha sniffed. "I always behave." Charles raised one elegant eyebrow. "Aggie, in the last 48 hours you've intimidated a schoolteacher, interrogated a baker, harassed an estate agent, and threatened a foxglove bed." "That was investigative initiative," Agatha snapped, settling into her seat. They set off toward Mercester under a clear, cold evening sky, the kind that made street lamps look like theatrical spotlights and reflected faintly on Charles's polished bonnet. Agatha folded her arms tightly. She hated needing him. She hated even more the smug way he drove, as though the entire county existed to admire his competence. After 3 sharp phone calls and 1 sulky lecture from Bill about procedure, she got permission, barely. Bill Wong had reluctantly agreed to let them into Celia's rented office, on the strict condition that Agatha stay within permitted areas and avoid rummaging. Agatha fully intended to honour at least one of those instructions. They reached the low business block, one of those anonymous little units fitted between a flooring showroom and a dental supplier. A lone junior officer stood guard inside, young enough to look flattered when Charles complimented his attention to duty. Agatha slipped past them the moment the officer's expression softened. Celia's office was small but aggressively neat, files stacked precisely, pens aligned, a corkboard of motivational quotes arranged in maddening straight lines. Under the desk lamp her folders glowed like secrets wanting to be touched. Agatha obeyed. She rifled the first box, wincing at Celia's handwriting, which resembled a disapproving vine. Most documents were bland: lists of clients, menus for tea events, catering receipts. But halfway through a second file she found something juicier: photocopies of Carsley property listings, Graham Pritt's listings. She flipped a page. A typed letter appeared, stapled to a furious handwritten note. We were assured the cottage had been inspected. No mention of damp structural cracks or drainage issues. You misled us. Legal action is now under consideration. Agatha whistled softly. Oh, Graham, you incompetent little worm. Another document lay beneath. A draft complaint addressed to the estate agency headquarters, accusing Graham of deceptive descriptions and requesting disciplinary review. Celia had been planning to ruin him professionally before someone ruined her physically. Agatha's pulse quickened. Then another folder caught her eye. Smaller, marked with initials she recognized. An elderly parish lady who'd been taken unwell after the tea. Inside were notes about savings optimization, high-pressure guidance, and risk-adjusted returns, none of which sounded charitable. Celia had clearly been pulling strings there too. Agatha's mind buzzed. So the poisoning wasn't random, she muttered. A warning. Someone sending a message to anyone connected to Celia's schemes. Behind her, Charles coughed gently. Aggie, dear, you're rummaging. Researching, she corrected. And don't sneak up. It makes you look guilty. Charles inspected a stack of papers with fastidious distaste. She kept notes on everyone, even me. He pointed to an index card reading, CF, high-status connections, exploitable, possibly useful if cultivated. Agatha burst out laughing. She thought you were useful, poor woman. Quite, Charles said, though he looked faintly proud. Agatha returned to the boxes, flipping pages rapidly. A crisp envelope slid out. Inside was a signed engagement letter from a London PR firm, Roy Silver's firm. Agatha groaned. Oh, not Roy. Charles peered over. What now? She was negotiating a PR package with Roy's office. Big campaign, but the deal went sour. She held up another page, an internal memo complaining about Roy's unreliable delivery schedule and flamboyant disregard for deadlines. Charles chuckled. Sounds accurate. Agatha frowned. Roy was many things, dramatic, chaotic, fond of adjectives. But murderous? She doubted it. Still, the motive was there. Public humiliation, lost income, reputational damage. And a PR man might know exactly how to craft a neat threat note. Agatha tucked the Roy file aside. Another red herring to keep in play. Charles steered her gently toward the door. We've seen enough, and Bill will flay us alive if he suspects you've been reorganizing. Bill flays no one, she muttered. He disapproves, she shuddered. Worse. Outside the building, cold air hit her like a slap of reason. She stood still for a moment, the weight of information settling on her like a thick scarf. Celia had been building a blackmail empire, collecting leverage, cataloguing sins, drafting complaints. She'd pressed her nose into too many pies and enraged more villagers than the WI on a budget discussion night. One of them had killed her. And the pattern was beginning to point in a single direction. One small, nervous man with foxgloves, financial misconduct, and a collapsing professional life. Charles drove them back toward Carsley, the heater humming faintly. You look thoughtful, he observed, always a dangerous sign. Celia had a file on Graham Pritt thicker than Harriet's waist, Agatha declared. She was going to expose him. Or she exaggerated. She seemed the type. Agatha shook her head. That complaint draft was real, and that letter from the buyers, genuine fury. Charles made a thoughtful noise. Graham isn't exactly a criminal mastermind. Desperation can turn cowards inventive, Agatha replied, and foxgloves are a very local poison. When they reached the village, Agatha insisted on stopping at the vicarage. Charles declined to come in, muttering something about divine spaces making him sneeze. Agatha marched up the path and knocked briskly. Mrs. Bloxby opened the door, serene as always. Agatha, dear, I was just making tea. Tell me everything, Agatha said, sweeping inside, particularly anything involving foxgloves, financial sins, or people creeping around gardens at dusk. Mrs. Bloxby blinked. That's quite a list. Agatha dropped onto the sofa. I'm in an investigative whirlwind. Enlighten me. Mrs. Bloxby poured tea gently. A parishioner mentioned seeing someone near the Pritt's foxglove bed the evening before Celia's Carsley tea. Someone moving quickly. hard to identify in the dim light. Agatha sat bolt upright. Which evening? The evening before Celia's big Carsley tea. Agatha could practically feel her heart clench with satisfaction. Then he was preparing something. Mrs. Bloxby's expression was troubled. Be careful, Agatha. Suspicion is one thing, accusation is another. I'm not accusing, Agatha lied, already halfway there. She left the vicarage buzzing, ideas spinning like a Catherine wheel. Foxgloves clipped shortly before the murder. Soil on Graham's cuff. Financial misconduct exposed in Celia's files. A draft complaint that would have destroyed his career, and a threat note telling her to stop digging or be buried. Everything pointed, quietly but firmly, toward the fussy estate agent who trembled when Agatha approached him. Back at her cottage, darkness pooled across the lane. She lit a cigarette, just one, and stepped outside, letting the glow illuminate her scowl. "Graham Pritt," she murmured, "you bland little worm, what have you done?" In the quiet, something rustled in the hedge. A cat slinked out. Hodge, annoyed she had stepped out without him. He circled her ankles, tail flicking with mild rebuke. Agatha crouched, stroking his back. "It's getting serious, Hodge. Secrets everywhere, foxgloves disappearing, ledgers filled with sins. Carsley is practically bursting with drama." Hodge nudged her chin, unimpressed. Agatha exhaled, watching the cigarette tip glow faintly in the dark. She felt a strange mix of dread and satisfaction. Dread because the truth was forming, satisfaction because she was closing in on it. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "I confront Graham properly." She scooped up Hodge, who purred approvingly now that he had reclaimed her attention, and carried him inside. The kettle sighed on the hob. The fire gave a small crackle. The cottage closed warmly around her. Agatha Raisin, cigarette extinguished, murder theory solidifying, felt the quiet thrill of a hunter on the trail. And somewhere in Carsley, someone else felt the noose tightening. "Don't look so smug," Agatha told Charles as they entered the WI hall. "This is a precision operation." Charles gave her a languid smile. "Aggie, everything you attempt becomes a spectacle. I'm only here to supervise the collision." Agatha ignored him. She had chosen the WI hall deliberately. Neutral ground, public enough for witnesses, and cramped enough that Graham Pritt couldn't wriggle away. Harriet stood rigid behind a trestle table dusted with flour from her latest baking marathon. Claire Jennings sat near the window, pale but steady, hands clenched in her lap. A small scattering of WI ladies loitered with the gleeful tension of people expecting either enlightenment or scandal. Bill Wong arrived last, looking like a man already exhausted by whatever Agatha had planned. "This is not an interrogation room," Bill warned. "It doesn't need to be," Agatha said brightly. "Just a place where truth flourishes." "Like mould," Charles murmured. Graham Pritt hovered near the door, fiddling with a file of property listings. He jumped when Agatha approached him. "Graham," she said, steady and calm, "we need to discuss Celia Harcourt." His swallow was audible. I don't see why. I told you I barely knew her." Harriet's voice cracked. "You told me the same, but apparently she had a file on you, a whole file." Graham flinched. "Harriet, I can explain." "You will," Agatha cut in. "Just not to Harriet, to all of us." Bill rubbed his temples. "Agatha," she held up a hand. "Bill, trust me for once." He didn't, but he didn't drag her out either, which she took as victory. Agatha placed the photocopied complaint letter on the table. This was in Celia's office. A buyer threatening legal action because of damp and structural damage in a cottage you marketed as sound and charming. Graham's face drained of colour. "And here," she continued, placing another sheet, "a draft letter Celia wrote to your head office outlining your creative description methods." Harriet gasped softly, one hand flying to her mouth. Graham stuttered. She misunderstood. She twisted things." "And of course," Agatha said evenly, "your foxglove bed was trimmed the night before the tea. Very neat, very recent, highly suspicious." Harriet stared at him. "Foxgloves? Graham, why would you—" He backed away a step. "This is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous." "Then answer the question," Agatha said, stepping closer. "Why did Celia know exactly how to ruin you? Why did she threaten your job? And why," Agatha lowered her voice, "did she receive a note telling her to stop digging or be buried, a note written by someone who knew exactly what she was digging up?" Silence cracked across the room. Graham's breath came fast and shallow. I wouldn't. Then Harriet whispered the sentence that broke him. Graham, did you poison her? He snapped. No, he shouted. No, I never thought she'd... Every head in the room jerked. Bill's posture changed instantly. Alert, attentive, ready. Agatha pressed. Never meant what, Graham? Graham looked cornered, sweating, shaking. She found out, all right. She knew about the damp, the overvaluation. She had the documents. She said she was sending everything to my boss on Monday. Harriet, I didn't want you to know. Harriet stared, horrified. Graham's voice cracked. I only wanted to scare her. Just scare her. I thought if she felt ill, she'd stop. Claire gasped. One of the WI women clutched her pearls with theatrical relish. Bill stepped forward. Mr. Pritt, I need you to... No, Graham breathed, and something inside him snapped like old plaster. He bolted toward the kitchen. Agatha reacted first. Oh, no, you don't. She grabbed his sleeve, but Graham's panic lent him strength. He yanked her forward, stumbling through the swinging kitchen door. Bill lunged, but the door slammed between them. The small kitchen was chaos. Stacked trays, mixing bowls, the clatter of utensils disturbed, and beyond it, the cramped pantry, barely large enough for 2 adults. Graham dragged Agatha inside. Graham, she barked, unhand me this instant. But he was beyond hearing. He released her only long enough to grab the nearest object, a rolling pin, heavy and flour-dusted. Agatha froze. Graham, she said slowly, whatever you're thinking, stop. Now. His eyes darted wildly. I didn't mean to kill her. I swear I didn't. She opened the locked jar in the kitchen right in front of me and said it needed more tang, Clue confirmed. Agatha felt her stomach twist. You knew she tasted it in the kitchen, she said. Only the murderer would know that. Graham whimpered and lifted the rolling pin reflexively, not to strike, but as though holding it might anchor him to something sane. Agatha backed into the shelves, painfully aware that she was about to die in a room full of flour and tea towels, wearing shoes that cost more than Graham's entire suit. The pantry door remained ajar by 2 inches. Through it, she heard Charles drawl, Graham, old chap, this is all very dramatic, but hardly necessary. Charles's voice flowed through the crack like warm treacle. You've made a muddle, he continued pleasantly. Nothing more, and you know muddles can be managed. Graham's breathing hitched. Managed? She was going to ruin me. Possibly, Charles allowed, but murder ruins people much faster. Agatha rolled her eyes despite herself. Trust Charles to soothe with charm while insulting someone. Bill spoke next, steady but firm. Graham, listen carefully. Put the rolling pin down and step out. No one is hurt. No one needs to get hurt. Agatha muttered, Speak for yourself. Graham gripped her wrist again, not hard enough to bruise, but tight with desperation. I never wanted this, he said, voice trembling. I only wanted her to stop digging. She kept saying she had a moral duty to expose fraud. Who does that? Who destroys people for fun? You do, Agatha snapped, every time you overvalue a cottage. Now let go. Graham's breath stuttered. I can't. Yes, you can, Charles said gently. And you will, or you'll make everything far worse. Graham's grip loosened, fractionally. Bill saw his moment. The door burst open. Bill dove in, catching Graham's arm. The rolling pin clattered to the floor. Graham flailed wildly, sending a cloud of flour into the air as bags toppled from the shelves. Agatha shrieked as she was buried in a ghostly plume of white powder. My hair! Bill wrestled Graham down, sliding in flour, both men coughing. Another bag collapsed overhead, showering them again. Charles appeared in the doorway, nose wrinkled. Good heavens, it's like wrestling in a bakery blizzard. Bill finally pinned Graham, panting. Graham Pritt, you are under arrest for suspicion of murder by poisoning. Graham broke. His face crumpled in despair. I didn't mean to kill her, he sobbed. Just make her back off. Harriet stood in the kitchen doorway, pale as uncooked dough. Graham, how could you? Graham shut his eyes. He had no answer. Claire Jennings began crying softly, relief and shock entwined. The WI women whispered furiously, delighted to witness something they would recount for years. Agatha stood upright, dusting flour from her blazer in affronted bursts. I'll never get this out. Never. Why do these things always happen when I'm wearing something new? Charles smirked. Because fate enjoys a joke. Bill handcuffed Graham gently, guiding him to his feet. Come on, let's get you out of here. As they passed Agatha, Graham's eyes filled with weary resignation. I didn't poison anyone else, he muttered. I panicked and left a warning note. I wanted her to stop, nothing more. I panicked when she said Celia was her financial advisor. Thought Celia would twist that too. I only wanted to warn them both. Agatha stared. So you tried to poison twice? Graham nodded miserably. I didn't mean for it to go that far. Bill escorted him out. Harriet collapsed into a chair, shaking. Claire offered her a timid handkerchief. The WI women were already drafting the scandal into oral tradition. Charles stepped beside Agatha and plucked a bit of flour from her eyelashes. You look like a disgruntled snowman. Oh, shut up, Agatha muttered. Agatha stepped outside the hall, needing air. Rain had begun, a thin, persistent drizzle that tapped nervously on the pavement. She lit a cigarette, just one for her nerves, and inhaled slowly. The ember glowed in the damp air, casting her face in a weary orange halo. Bill approached, hands in pockets. Well, he said, you did a decent job. Agatha blinked. What? Don't make me repeat it, Bill said dryly. But yes, decent. Agatha felt an absurd flicker of pride. Thank you, Bill added. Never use the WI hall as a trap again. She scowled. Spoil sport. He sighed. Get home, Agatha. Take a bath. You look like a scone. He walked away. Agatha watched him go, rain tapping softly around her. She took one last drag, stubbed the cigarette, and headed home. Inside, Hodge greeted her with a chirrup, sniffed the flower on her skirt, and sneezed pointedly. Oh, hush, Agatha said, scooping him up. You didn't have to face a rolling pin today. Hodge butted his head against her chin, purring. Agatha exhaled, letting the warmth of home seep into her bones. It was over. Celia's killer was caught. The WI had a story for a generation, and Agatha Raisin, battered, floured, exhausted, felt the familiar, smug satisfaction of being right. The kettle sighed. Hodge stretched, and Agatha, settling into her chair, muttered, Next time I solve a murder, I'm wearing washable fabrics. Honestly, Agatha, you mustn't scowl like that. People will think you're unwell. Agatha shot Mrs. Bloxby a look that might have curdled fresh cream. The WI debrief tea, an event she had absolutely not authorized, had been called together by the more officious members, ostensibly to reflect on recent upheavals. In truth, it was a village-wide attempt to soothe nerves and gossip with a level of enthusiasm normally reserved for royal weddings. I'm scowling, Agatha muttered, because everyone keeps patting me as though I'm a slightly troubled Labrador. Mrs. Mason leaned over with a sympathetic pat. All's well that ends well, Mrs. Raisin. A pity about your shoes in the pantry, of course, but you behaved very bravely. Agatha nearly inhaled her tea. Across the hall, Harriet Pritt, now the village's favourite tragic heroine, sat surrounded by women offering casseroles, vouchers, and unsolicited advice. The sheer tide of affection directed at her made Agatha want to weep, or possibly throw a sandwich. It's ridiculous, she hissed to Mrs. Bloxby. I did half the work, if not more. You uncovered the truth, Mrs. Bloxby agreed kindly, but Harriet lost a great deal too. Agatha hated when Mrs. Bloxby was right. She hated it even more when rightness came wrapped in kindness. Bill Wong arrived halfway through the meeting, still smelling faintly of paperwork and moral responsibility. Several WI ladies immediately descended on him, demanding updates. Bill managed to disentangle himself and sit beside Agatha. We've got a watertight case, he said quietly. Foxglove compound confirmed in Celia's curd. We recovered the jar from the kitchen area. Graham's fingerprints are on it. And the files in her office show clear motive. Professional collapse, desperation, all of it. Agatha lifted her chin. You see? I told you he was the one. Bill gave her a sideways smile. Yes, you did a decent job. I beg your pardon? You heard me. Don't make me say it twice. Agatha felt a warm flutter she quickly crushed beneath cool self-importance. Well, I suppose recognizing genius is a virtue. Bill ignored that. No one else was targeted, Bill said quietly. Just Celia, and the lab confirmed foxglove compound in what she ate. Poor woman, Agatha murmured. Celia wasn't content making tea catastrophic. She had to meddle financially too. Bill nodded. I meant to tell you. Our forensic team found Celia's notes on local investment opportunities. She'd been giving pressure-heavy advice. Graham panicked when he thought she'd drag others into his mess. Agatha felt a small, grim satisfaction. Her instincts had been annoyingly accurate. The meeting wound down at last. Women gathered coats, exchanged theories that somehow still contradicted the established facts, and drifted home in warm little clusters. Agatha lingered by the tea urn, reluctant to join the mild, peaceful evening outside. She was still there when the phone in her handbag rang shrilly. She answered it before remembering she hated being caught off guard. "Darling," Roy Silver trilled, "I've heard everything. Poison, pastries, foxglove drama. Why didn't you call me? We could have turned this into a Cotswold crime and cake campaign." "No," Agatha said flatly. "Think of the branding." "No," she repeated, "and don't you dare pitch it to anyone." "Too late," Roy said cheerfully, "but you'd be marvellous in a radio interview. Your voice has such texture." Agatha hung up to prevent murder number 3. Outside, the village lay washed in pale evening light, as though trying very hard to pretend the last week had been perfectly ordinary. Carsley excelled at selective memory. Charles's convertible appeared moments later, gliding up the lane like a cat on polished wheels. He stepped out holding a bottle of wine. "For the heroine," Agatha sniffed. "If I'm the heroine, why is Harriet getting casseroles?" "Because casseroles are the currency of pity, and pity is dull," Charles said crisply. "Wine, however, is the currency of admiration." She allowed herself a small smile. "Well, I suppose you may come in." Hodge greeted them with the faint look of a creature assessing whether visitors would disturb his kingdom. When Charles sat, Hodge immediately stole his seat the moment he stood to pour the wine. "A tyrant," Charles declared. "Your cat is a tyrant." "Of course he is," Agatha said. "He lives with me." They toasted, Charles calling her disastrous but effective, Agatha claiming she had single-handedly saved at least 3 lives, possibly the global tea industry. He raised an eyebrow but didn't disagree. Halfway through her sandwich, Agatha felt a soft tug. Hodge had stretched across her plate and stolen a triangle with surgical precision. "Hodge!" she cried. He chewed smugly, tail twitching with feline amusement. Charles laughed. "Even your cat thinks you've earned humility." "Oh, be quiet." Later, after Charles left with exaggerated bows and suggestions of brandy, Agatha settled by the fire. Hodge curled by her hip, purring in the steady rhythm of a creature who assumed the world would right itself eventually. Agatha lit a cigarette, one, slow, reflective, and exhaled thoughtfully. Smoke drifted upward in lazy spirals. She thought of Celia Harcourt, clever, meddling, relentless. She thought of Graham, small, frightened, cracking under the weight of his own deceit. She thought of herself, vain, dramatic, ferociously hungry to be admired, and yet, undeniably, someone who saved lives more often than she ruined them. Her pride was sore, her shoes were ruined, her blazer still smelled faintly of flour, but her name was being whispered, beyond Carsley even. Roy's hysterical chatter hinted at it, and that pleased her more than she would ever confess aloud. The phone rang again from the hallway. Agatha frowned. "Who rings at this hour?" She answered it crisply. "Mrs. Raisin? We've never met," an unfamiliar voice said. "I'm from Evesham. I've heard you're someone who solves rather odd little matters." Agatha straightened, cigarette dangling elegantly between 2 fingers. "Odd matters," she said. "I specialize in them." "Well," the caller continued hesitantly, "I'm afraid I've got one." Agatha's eyes brightened. Hodge lifted his head, sensing adventure. She smiled, a slow, eager, dangerous smile. "Tell me everything," she said. And so Carsley exhaled into peace while Agatha Raisin prepared, as always, for the next peculiar engagement life insisted on throwing at her.